The rain fell on New York City like a shroud, but inside the opulent Rolls-Royce, a different kind of storm was raging. A man worth hundreds of millions, his face a mask of cold fury, turned to his pregnant wife. "You're a liability," he spat the words colder than the chilled champagne in his hand. He didn't just ask her to leave, he ordered his driver to pull over on a dark, rain-slicked street and forced her out. As the car sped away, leaving her sobbing on the pavement, a secret was left behind, with her, a secret the driver had kept for years. That driver wasn't just an employee, he was her protector, a silent guardian with a net worth that dwarfed her husband's 100 times over. And he was about to unleash a reckoning. The world inside the Rolls-Royce Phantom was one of muted luxury. The scent of Italian leather and Preston Beaumont's offensively expensive cologne filled the small space, thick and suffocating. Outside rain lashed against the bulletproof glass, turning the vibrant lights of Manhattan into blurry, impressionistic streaks. For Audra Beaumont, the storm outside was a pale imitation of the one brewing beside her. "I don't understand, Preston," she said, her voice trembling. Her hand rested instinctively on the gentle swell of her belly, a 5-month curve that held all her hopes. The gala was a success. "Your speech was—" "My speech was brilliant. The deal is closed," Preston interrupted, not even bothering to look at her. He was staring at his reflection in the darkened window, admiring the sharp cut of his custom tuxedo. "That's not the issue. The issue, Audra, is you." A cold dread, familiar yet always sharp, coiled in her stomach. "Me? What did I do?" He finally turned his blue eyes as flat and lifeless as polished stones. "What did you do? You existed. You stood there looking maternal, soft. It's not the image I need right now. Veronica has a certain edge. She understands the circles we're moving in now. Veronica Slade." The name was a venomous dart, his new vice president of strategic acquisitions, a woman with a predatory smile and a wardrobe that cost more than Audra's college education. Audra had seen the way Preston looked at her, the way their hands brushed together for a fraction too long. "She's your employee, Preston. I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." Preston laughed, a short, ugly sound, devoid of humor. "Let's be honest, shall we? You were a convenient accessory when I was building my empire. The sweet, unassuming orphan girl. It played well. But Beaumont Industries is entering the global market. I need a partner, not a dependent." He waved a dismissive hand at her stomach. "And that is the biggest dependency of all." Tears welled in Audra's eyes, hot and shameful. "How can you say that? This is our baby. Is it?" He sneered, the cruelty in his voice finally unleashed. "You've been so mopey and distant these past few months. Who knows what you've been up to while I've been working to give you this life?" The accusation struck her with the force of a physical blow. It was so baseless, so vile, that she couldn't even form a response. She had been nothing but faithful, dedicating her life to being the perfect, supportive wife he'd claimed to want. "That's it," he said, seeing her stunned silence as an admission of guilt. "I'm done. This charade is over." He leaned forward and rapped on the partition. "Vince, pull over." The driver, a quiet, stoic man in his late 50s with graying temples and kind eyes, met Audra's gaze in the rearview mirror for a fleeting second. His expression was unreadable, but she thought she saw a flicker of something pity-concern. He'd been with them for 2 years, a silent presence in their lives. His name was Vince. He was always punctual, always professional, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. The car glided to a stop on a deserted side street in the West Village, far from their Upper East Side penthouse. The rain was relentless now, drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof. "Get out," Preston commanded. Audra stared at him, disbelief warring with terror. "What here, Preston? It's pouring. I don't have a coat. My phone is in my clutch." "Your clutch is in the car. You can leave it. Consider it a parting gift," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. He reached over his movements, sharp and angry, and opened her door. A blast of cold, wet air filled the car. "Out. Now. Or I'll have Vince drag you out." She looked at Vince again in the mirror, a silent plea in her eyes. He remained perfectly still, his hands on the wheel. He was just an employee. What could he do? Sobbing Audra stumbled out of the car. The silk of her evening gown was instantly soaked, clinging to her skin like a cold shroud. The Louboutin heels, a gift from Preston, sank into a puddle. He tossed her small beaded clutch onto the wet pavement. "My lawyer will be in touch." Preston said, his face a cold, impassive mask in the window. "He'll inform you of the terms of the pre-nuptial agreement. You'll find it's quite restrictive." The door slammed shut. The powerful engine purred, and the Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb, its red taillights disappearing into the curtain of rain. Audra stood alone, shivering, and drenched the sounds of the city muffled by the downpour. Despair washed over her, a wave so powerful it threatened to pull her under. She had no one. Her parents, Thomas and Lena Monroe, had died in a car crash when she was 19, leaving her with a modest inheritance that Preston had quickly invested and absorbed into his own accounts. She had no family, no close friends Preston hadn't pushed away. She was completely, utterly alone. She hugged her arms around herself, trying to shield her baby from the cold. A car horn blared nearby, and she flinched. The world felt hostile, a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. How could the man she had loved, the man who had promised to cherish her, do this? Just as a sob tore from her throat, a long black shape glided back to the curb beside her. The back window of the Rolls-Royce hummed down, and Audra flinched, expecting another torrent of abuse from Preston. But it wasn't Preston. The partition was down, and the driver's seat was empty. It was Vince leaning over from the driver's side, his face etched with a deep, unfamiliar concern. "Get in, Audra," he said, his voice, a low, steady rumble that cut through the noise of the storm. It was gentle, yet held an authority she had never heard from him before. "But Preston," she stammered, confused. "Preston Beaumont is no longer our concern," Vince said, his eyes meeting hers. In their depths, she saw not the deference of an employee, but the hardened resolve of a protector. "Get in the car. It's time for you to come home." Numb with shock and shivering uncontrollably, Audra did as he said. She slid into the plush back seat, dripping water onto the pristine lamb's wool carpets. Vince was already out of the car, rounding the front to open the passenger door, but she had moved on autopilot. He retrieved her drenched clutch from the pavement before getting back behind the wheel. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he turned up the heat, the warmth blasting through the vents, a welcome relief to her frozen limbs. He then reached into the polished walnut compartment in front of her, retrieving a thick cashmere blanket. "Here," he said, passing it back to her. His voice was calm, a steady anchor in her swirling sea of confusion and grief. She wrapped the impossibly soft blanket around her shoulders, the sobs she'd been holding back finally breaking free. She cried for her lost love, for the humiliation, for the terrifying uncertainty of her future, and for the innocent child within her who deserved so much more than this. Vince drove in silence, letting her cry. He didn't offer empty platitudes or awkward reassurances. He simply drove his movements smooth and confident, navigating the rain-slicked streets with an ease that belied the turmoil of the past few minutes. He didn't drive towards the Upper East Side penthouse she had called home. Instead, he headed downtown towards the towering skyscrapers of the financial district, an area she rarely visited. Eventually, her sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Will Preston fire you for this?" Vince's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror again. "Let me be clear, Audra. I don't work for Preston Beaumont. I work for you." Her brow furrowed. "For me, I don't pay you. Preston does. That's a technicality." He said, a faint, dry smile touching his lips. "My loyalties have always been with you." The car descended into a private, subterranean parking garage beneath a gleaming black skyscraper that scraped the clouds. It was a building she recognized but had never paid much attention to, the monolithic headquarters of Davenport Industries, a global conglomerate with interests in everything from technology and finance to aerospace. Vince parked in a reserved spot directly beside a private elevator. The spot was marked with a single imposing name, V. Davenport. Audra stared at the sign, her mind struggling to connect the dots. "Vince. Davenport," she whispered the name, sounding foreign and familiar at the same time. He switched off the engine, and the car fell into a profound silence. He turned in his seat to face her fully, his expression serious. The deferential mask of Vince the driver was gone. In its place was a man of immense power and quiet authority. "My full name is Vincent Davenport," he said, his voice even. "And your father, Thomas Monroe, was my best friend. More than that, he was the brother I chose. We grew up together, started our first businesses together out of a garage. Before he and your mother passed, he made me promise I would always watch over you." Audra's world tilted on its axis. She stared at the man she had known only as a driver, trying to reconcile the image of the quiet, uniformed man with the name Davenport, a name synonymous with staggering wealth and influence. A name whispered with awe in the same circles Preston so desperately wanted to conquer. Preston was a millionaire. Vincent Davenport was a billionaire many times over. You're my godfather." She breathed a memory surfacing from the fog of her childhood. A kind, laughing man her father called Vinny, who had bounced her on his knee and brought her elaborate toys from his travels. He had faded from her life after her parents' funeral, which she had been too grief-stricken to fully process. She had assumed he was just another one of her father's business associates who had moved on. "I am," Vincent confirmed. "After the funeral you went to live with your aunt, and I thought it best to give you space to grieve, to live a normal life. I respected your independence. I set up a trust, monitored it from a distance. When you started dating Preston, I ran a background check. He was ambitious, a bit ruthless, but I saw nothing that set off major alarms. He seemed to make you happy." He sighed, a deep, heavy sound of regret. "But I kept watching. When you got married, I decided the best way to honor my promise to your father was to be close, to see the real man, not the public facade. So I had one of my security specialists create a flawless identity. Vince, the highly qualified chauffeur with impeccable references. Preston's ego was so large, he never once questioned why a man of my supposed caliber would want to be his personal driver. He just assumed he deserved the best." Audra was speechless, her mind reeling. The quiet man in the front seat had been her guardian angel all along, hidden in plain sight. Every polite nod, every time he'd opened her door, he'd been watching, assessing, protecting. "I saw the changes in him." Vincent continued, his voice hardening. "The cruelty that crept in behind closed doors, the casual disregard for your feelings. Tonight, when he brought Veronica to the gala and flaunted her in front of you, I knew the end was near. I was prepared for this, Audra. I have been for months. He gestured to the elevator. This building, this car, everything is mine. You are safe now. He cannot touch you here. He got out of the car and came around to open her door, but this time it was different. It wasn't the motion of a servant, but a gesture of chivalry of family. He offered his hand, and she took it. His grip was firm and reassuring. He led her to the private elevator, which opened with a quiet chime, activated by his thumbprint. Inside the elevator was a small paneled room. He pressed the button for the penthouse. "I am so sorry, Audra," he said, his voice thick with emotion as the elevator ascended. "I let you get hurt. I wanted to give you the freedom to live your own life, but in doing so, I let a monster get his claws into you. That is a failure I will spend the rest of my life atoning for." "No," Audra whispered, tears filling her eyes again. But this time they were tears of gratitude. "You didn't fail. You were here. When I had no one. You were here." The elevator doors opened directly into a breathtaking apartment. It was a sprawling 2-story space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the glittering city. The decor was tasteful and minimalist, a stark contrast to Preston's gaudy, gold-plated aesthetic. It was a home, not a showroom. A woman in a neat business suit, Ms. Chen Vincent's executive assistant, was waiting. She smiled warmly at Audra. "Welcome, Ms. Monroe. We have everything ready for you. A hot bath is drawn, and there's a meal prepared whenever you're hungry." Vincent guided Audra toward a hallway. "Get warm, get some rest. We can talk about everything in the morning." He paused, his expression turning grim. "And Audra, don't worry about Preston or his threats. He thinks he's a king in this city. Tomorrow he's going to learn that he's just a pawn in a game he doesn't even know he's playing. The Beaumont Empire is about to experience a storm. It will not survive." Audra woke to the soft, diffused light of morning filtering through automated blinds. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar silk sheets and the quiet hum of the city far below, a stark departure from the life she had known. Then the memories of the previous night crashed down on her, the rain, Preston's cold voice, the humiliation, and the stunning revelation of her godfather's identity. She sat up, her hand going to her belly. The baby was quiet. A wave of anxiety washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't alone. For the first time since her parents died, she felt truly safe. A fresh set of comfortable clothes, a soft cashmere sweater, and leggings had been laid out for her. After a long, hot shower, she felt more human. She found Vincent in a large, open-plan living area, standing before the vast windows with a tablet in his hand, a cup of coffee steaming on a marble table beside him. He was dressed not in a driver's uniform, but in a perfectly tailored grey suit that spoke of quiet, immense power. "Good morning," he said, his smile genuine. "I trust you slept well." "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted, her voice still a little hoarse. "Vincent, I still can't believe all of this." "Believe it," he said gently. "Now I know you're exhausted, but there are a few things we need to discuss. My legal team is already at work." He gestured for her to sit on one of the plush sofas. Ms. Chen appeared with a tray bearing tea toast and fruit for Audra. Preston mentioned a pre-nuptial agreement, Audra said, her stomach tightening. He made it sound like I would be left with nothing. Vincent's expression turned cold. Oh, he certainly intended for that to be the case. His lawyers drafted one of the most predatory, one-sided prenups I have ever seen. It essentially stated that in the event of a divorce, you would waive all rights to any assets acquired during the marriage and would receive a one-time payout of $50,000. Audra's heart sank. That was barely enough to live on for a year in this city, let alone raise a child. However Vincent continued a predatory glint in his eye. Preston made a mistake. He became so blinded by his own arrogance that he didn't do his due diligence. He insisted his own legal team handle everything. He didn't know that I had your father's power of attorney, and as your legal guardian at the time you were married, I had the right to review and amend any legal documents you signed. He tapped his tablet, and a document appeared on the large screen mounted on the wall. I had my own lawyers, the best corporate litigators in the world, review his draft. We made a few additions, small clauses buried deep in the legalese. Preston and his B-team lawyers were so eager to get it signed, they never noticed. He zoomed in on a section. For instance, this clause here, the moral turpitude and fidelity clause. It states that if the marriage is dissolved due to proven infidelity or public conduct that brings shame upon the union, such as, for example, abandoning a pregnant spouse on a city street, the entire prenup is rendered null and void. Furthermore, it triggers a penalty granting the wronged party 50% of the at-fault party's total net worth at the time of dissolution. Audra's jaw dropped. And this one, Vincent went on, clearly enjoying himself. The good faith investment clause. You mentioned that your inheritance was invested by him. This clause, which I had inserted, stipulates that any and all funds originating from your personal accounts and commingled with his must be treated as a priority investment. In case of divorce, those funds, along with a compounded interest rate of 20% per annum, are to be returned in full before any other assets are divided. He swiped to another document. We have already filed for divorce on your behalf this morning. The petition includes sworn affidavits from the doormen at your building who were witness to Preston's ongoing affair with Veronica Slade, and my own testimony regarding the events of last night. We have also filed an emergency motion to freeze all of his personal and business assets, pending the outcome of the divorce settlement. The motion was granted by a judge at 7 a.m. this morning. The scale of his planning was staggering. He hadn't just reacted to the situation, he had prepared for it with the precision of a grandmaster setting a chessboard. Meanwhile, across town, Preston Beaumont woke up in his penthouse, a dull headache throbbing behind his eyes. Veronica was asleep beside him, her makeup slightly smeared. He felt a surge of triumph. He was free. He had shed his dead weight and was ready to conquer the world with a sleek, ambitious woman by his side. He strode into his office, ready to make calls to celebrate his new deal. His first call was to his bank to wire a celebratory bonus to Veronica. "I'm sorry, Mr. Beaumont," the bank manager said, his voice strained. "There appears to be a judicial hold on all your accounts. We can't process any transactions." Preston frowned. "What? That's impossible. It must be a mistake. Run it again." "Sir, it's not a mistake. It's a court order. All assets associated with you and Beaumont Industries have been frozen." Just then his personal assistant buzzed him. "Sir, a courier is here with an urgent legal delivery for you." A few minutes later, Preston stood in his office, the divorce papers trembling in his hand. He read through the petition, his face draining of color. Infidelity, moral turpitude, abandonment. And then he saw the name of the petitioner's legal counsel, Sterling, Price and Cromwell, the most feared, most expensive law firm in the country, a firm known for representing old money and corporate titans. A firm he could never hope to afford. He laughed a hysterical, disbelieving sound. "She can't do this. The little fool has no money. Who the hell is paying for this?" He scanned the documents again, his eyes falling on the witness list. They're listed as a primary witness for the plaintiff. Audra Monroe was a name that made his blood run cold. Vincent Davenport. The name hung in the air, an impossible, terrifying monolith. He thought back, his mind racing. The driver, the quiet, unassuming man he had ordered around for 2 years. He remembered the name on the driver's application, Vince. A ridiculously common name. He had never made the connection. It seemed too absurd, too outlandish to even consider. His phone rang. It was his lead lawyer, Mr. Peterson. "Preston, what the hell did you do?" Peterson's voice was frantic. "We've been served. Do you understand who you've just picked a fight with? This isn't just a divorce. It's a declaration of war from Vincent Davenport." Preston sank into his chair, the papers slipping from his numb fingers. The driver. The man he had ordered to throw his pregnant wife out into the rain. He hadn't just discarded a pawn. He had kicked the Queen and spat in the King's face. And now the entire board was being turned against him. Preston Beaumont's world, once a monument to his own ego, began to shrink. The first call he made, after the one with his panicked lawyer, was to his board of directors, attempting to project an aura of calm control. "It's a minor domestic issue," he'd said, his voice a tight, forced baritone. "A frivolous lawsuit designed to embarrass me. It will be dealt with swiftly." But the name Vincent Davenport had its own gravity. It bent reality around it. News of the asset freeze spread through the financial world like a contagion. By noon, Beaumont Industries' stock had begun to plummet. Creditors who had been happy to extend him millions in credit were suddenly calling their voices laced with a new, unwelcome urgency. His attempts to reach Audra were futile. Her old number was disconnected. Emails bounced back, blocked. He drove to the penthouse where Vincent lived, a desperate, wild plan forming in his mind to confront the man, but he was stopped by building security men who looked like they chewed nails for breakfast, and was politely but firmly informed that if he set foot on the property again, he would be arrested for trespassing. Humiliated and seething, he returned to his own penthouse, which now felt less like a castle and more like a gilded cage. Veronica, who had initially been thrilled at the prospect of becoming the next Mrs. Beaumont, was now looking at him with a calculating coolness. "You told me she was nobody. Preston," she said, filing her nails with a sharp, metallic sound that grated on his nerves. "You failed to mention she was the goddaughter of a man who could buy this entire city block with his pocket change." "It's a complication," he snapped. He was just their driver. How was I supposed to know he was playing a part? "And you fell for it," she said, her voice a silken barb. "You were so busy admiring your own reflection, you never thought to look at who was holding the mirror." "What does this mean for us? For the deal, nothing changes," he blustered, pouring himself a large scotch. "I built this company from nothing. I won't let some old relic and his little tramp take it from me." But his bravado was a flimsy shield against the onslaught. His lawyer, Mr. Peterson, called again, his voice even more strained. "Preston, their opening offer just came in. It's not a negotiation. It's an execution." "What is it?" Preston demanded. "They're enacting the moral turpitude clause. They're demanding 50% of your net worth, which they've calculated with terrifying accuracy, I might add, at $375 million. They also want the full return of Audra's inheritance, which with the 20% compounded interest as stipulated in the contract, comes to nearly $5 million. Finally, they are demanding full sole custody of the unborn child, with you relinquishing all parental rights in exchange for them not pursuing criminal charges for endangerment." Preston choked on his scotch. "Criminal charges? That's absurd, is it? You threw a pregnant woman out of a car in the middle of a storm. Preston, they have a witness, a very, very credible witness. They are also demanding you issue a public apology for the baseless accusations of infidelity you made against her. If you refuse, they will happily proceed to discovery. They will subpoena every text message, every email, every hotel receipt. They will depose Veronica. They will drag every skeleton out of your closet and dance with them on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The room began to spin. This was a systematic dismantling of his life, his reputation, and his wealth. This wasn't a legal battle. It was a public flogging. "Fight it," Preston snarled. "I don't care what it costs. Fight it with what money?" Preston Peterson asked, his voice weary. "Your assets are frozen. You can't even pay my retainer. Sterling Price and Cromwell can afford to litigate this for a decade without blinking. We'd be bankrupt in a month." Click. The line went dead. Peterson had hung up on him. Back in Vincent's penthouse, Audra sat with a nutritionist who was helping her design a diet for a healthy pregnancy. She was learning about folic acid and iron, her world shrinking to the simple vital task of caring for the life inside her. Vincent had created a bubble of tranquility for her, handling the war outside its walls. He entered the room as the nutritionist was leaving. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I'm okay," she said, which was the truth. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a play about her own life. "What's happening with him?" "He's reacting exactly as we predicted," Vincent said, taking a seat opposite her. "With arrogance and bluster. He's trying to fight, but he's like a man trying to punch the ocean. He doesn't yet comprehend the forces aligned against him." "Do you really think he'll agree to give up his parental rights?" she asked, her hand on her stomach. It was the one part of the legal strategy that gave her pause. Vincent's expression softened. "Audra, a man like Preston doesn't see a child. He sees a possession or a liability. Right now, that baby is a link to a battle he is destined to lose, a constant financial drain, and a reminder of his humiliation. He will fight for custody out of pride, not love. Our goal is to make the cost of that pride so astronomically high that he has no choice but to surrender. Your child will never be a pawn in his games. I promise you that." He paused, his gaze steady. "This is only the beginning. The divorce is just the opening salvo. Preston Beaumont hurt my family. I'm not just going to defeat him. I'm going to erase him." The quiet intensity in his voice was more chilling than any of Preston's loud threats. Preston was a bully who postured and yelled. Vincent was a force of nature, quiet and inexorable, and he had just begun to move. Preston saw the crack in his armor, but he had no idea that the entire fortress was about to be brought down around him. While the legal battle pinned Preston Beaumont down, Vincent Davenport began the second phase of his assault, the systematic destruction of Beaumont Industries. It was a campaign waged not with lawyers, but with traders, analysts, and corporate raiders, Vincent's true army. His first move was subtle. Through a series of shell corporations and third-party brokers, Davenport's financial arm began buying up Beaumont Industries' corporate debt. Preston, in his rapid expansion, had over-leveraged the company, using bonds and loans to finance his aggressive acquisitions. He had seen debt as a tool. Vincent was about to turn it into a weapon. Within a week, Vincent anonymously controlled over 40% of the company's liabilities. Next, Vincent targeted the company's talent. Beaumont Industries' success was built on a handful of brilliant engineers and innovative marketing executives whom Preston had poached from competitors. Vincent's headhunters, armed with irresistible offers, began reaching out. They didn't just offer more money. They offered stock options in stable, globally respected Davenport subsidiaries, creative freedom, and most importantly, an escape from the toxic, egocentric environment Preston had cultivated. The first to leave was the head of research and development, a woman named Dr. Alistair Finch. Her departure sent a shockwave through the company. Then 2 senior project managers followed. Then the entire lead marketing team resigned on the same day. Preston was left with a corporate shell staffed by terrified middle managers and sycophantic yes-men. He tried to counter with promises and threats, but it was useless. He was offering a position on a sinking ship. The financial news media, smelling blood in the water, began to circle. Forbes and the Wall Street Journal ran stories titled, "Beaumont's Bleeding Edge is the Tech Darling Imploding," and "Mystery Investor Squeezes Beaumont Industries." The articles detailed the stock's freefall, the mass exodus of key personnel, and the founder's ongoing messy divorce. Preston's carefully crafted image as a visionary genius was being shredded in public. Trapped in his penthouse, Preston grew increasingly paranoid and volatile. He spent his days pacing, drinking, and yelling at the few employees who still took his calls. His relationship with Veronica had soured completely. The allure of being with a powerful man had vanished, replaced by the ugly reality of being tied to a failing one. "You have to do something," she would shriek, her voice shrill with panic. "My reputation is tied to this company too." "What do you suggest I do?" he'd roar back. "I have no money, no allies. Everything I touch turns to dust." It was during one of these arguments that Veronica's true nature revealed itself. She had never been loyal to Preston. She had been loyal to power. Seeing that Preston's power was gone, she had made her own arrangements. "Maybe you're right," she said one afternoon, her tone suddenly calm and measured. "There's nothing you can do." She walked to the closet and began packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I'm leaving Preston," she said, without looking at him. "I have a new job, a wonderful offer actually. Vice President of European Markets for a new tech acquisition. The signing bonus alone is more than my yearly salary here." "You're abandoning me after everything," he sputtered, incredulous. She finally turned to face him, a smirk playing on her lips. "Let's be honest. You were a stepping stone. A rather loud, clumsy one, but effective for a time. But this is a mess. I'm not going down with you." He growled. "Who gave you a better offer?" "A very, very smart man," she said, snapping her suitcase shut. "He values talent, and he pays well for information." The realization hit Preston like a physical blow. "You've been talking to him, to Davenport. Mr. Davenport and I have had several very productive conversations," she said coolly. "He was very interested in the structural weaknesses of Beaumont Industries. Your 5-year expansion plans the names of your key clients. It turns out that information is quite valuable." She paused at the door. "Goodbye, Preston. And for what it's worth, Audra was always too good for you." The door clicked shut, leaving Preston alone in the cavernous apartment. He had been betrayed. The woman he had cast his wife aside for had been a Trojan horse, a spy in his own bed, feeding intelligence to his enemy. He stumbled to the window, looking out over the city that had once felt like his kingdom. Now every skyscraper seemed to mock him. He was surrounded, besieged, with no hope of escape. The legal attack had been a siege wall, and the corporate attack was the catapult hurling boulders that were smashing his empire to pieces. He finally understood. Vincent Davenport wasn't trying to win. He was playing a game of annihilation. Meanwhile, Audra was spending her afternoon in a brightly lit nursery. Vincent had insisted on converting one of the penthouse's large suites into a space for the baby. Together they were looking at paint swatches and furniture catalogues. Audra found herself laughing, truly laughing, as they debated the merits of a rocking chair shaped like a crescent moon. The trauma of the past weeks hadn't vanished, but it was receding, replaced by a quiet sense of anticipation and hope. She was no longer Audra Beaumont, the millionaire's discarded wife. She was Audra Monroe, a soon-to-be mother protected by a fierce and loving guardian. Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at the message from Ms. Chen. Veronica Slade has officially accepted our offer and vacated Mr. Beaumont's residence. The data she provided has been cross-referenced. It's all there. He looked at Audra, who was holding a pale yellow paint chip up to the light, a gentle smile on her face. He had built this sanctuary for her, a place of peace amidst the storm. Outside, the siege was reaching its crescendo. Soon the walls of Beaumont Industries would come crashing down. The final blow to Preston Beaumont's empire came not from a stock market crash or a legal judgment, but from his own boardroom. The men and women who sat on the board of Beaumont Industries were not his friends. They were investors, and their loyalty was to the bottom line. With the company's stock value reduced to a fraction of its former glory, its debt controlled by an unknown entity, and its founder mired in a catastrophic public scandal, their patience had evaporated. An emergency board meeting was called. Preston, dressed in a suit that now seemed to hang off his frame, tried to rally them. He spoke of future projects, of weathering the storm of his vision. But his words were hollow, his charisma gone, replaced by the desperate energy of a cornered animal. Halfway through his speech, the boardroom doors opened. Ms. Chen Vincent Davenport's impeccably poised assistant walked in, followed by two lawyers from Sterling, Price and Cromwell. "What is the meaning of this?" Preston roared, his authority already crumbling. "This is a private meeting." "Not anymore," one of the lawyers said smoothly. "We are here representing a consortium of investors who have recently acquired a controlling interest in this company." "What consortium?" a board member asked. Ms. Chen stepped forward. "The consortium is a wholly owned subsidiary of Davenport Industries," she announced, her voice calm and clear. "Over the past 2 weeks, we have acquired all of the company's outstanding corporate debt. As per the loan covenants, the current instability has triggered a default clause, allowing us to convert that debt into equity. As of 9:15 this morning, Davenport Industries is the majority shareholder of Beaumont Industries, controlling 58% of the voting stock." A stunned silence fell over the room. Preston stared at Ms. Chen, his face a mask of disbelief. He had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. While he was fighting a war on 2 fronts, Vincent had quietly bought the entire country from under him. "Our first act as majority shareholder," the lawyer continued, "is to call a vote of no confidence in the current CEO, Mr. Preston Beaumont." It was a formality. One by one, the board members, seeing their chance to salvage their own investments by aligning with the new power, raised their hands. Aye, aye, aye. The vote was unanimous. Preston was out. He was escorted from the boardroom, his boardroom, by security. As he walked past Ms. Chen, she met his gaze, her expression impassive. "Mr. Davenport sends his regards," she said softly. He was taken to his office to collect his personal belongings. The space, once his throne room, was now just a room. The awards on the shelf felt like cheap trinkets. The photos of him with celebrities and politicians seemed like relics from another man's life. He packed a single cardboard box with a few mementos and was then escorted out of the building he had built, past the employees, who refused to meet his eyes. That evening, the news broke. Davenport Industries executes stunning hostile takeover of Beaumont Industries. Founder Preston Beaumont ousted. The company would be restructured, absorbed into the Davenport Tech Division, and likely renamed. The Beaumont name, the legacy he had fought to build, would be wiped from existence. He returned to the penthouse, but it was no longer his. The asset freeze meant he couldn't pay the mortgage. Eviction notices had already been posted. The cavernous space was silent, stripped of Veronica's belongings, echoing with his failure. He stood at the vast window, the city lights twinkling below, like 1,000 mocking eyes. He had nothing, less than nothing. He had millions in personal debt from the impending divorce settlement, and no company, no income, no reputation. He had started with nothing, and now, after all his scheming and cruelty, he was back where he began, only older, more hated, and utterly alone. He finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had judged Audra by her gentle nature, assuming it was weakness. He had seen Vince as nothing more than a uniform, a non-person, and in his blindness had missed the apex predator hiding in plain sight. His arrogance had been a self-inflicted wound, and Vincent Davenport had simply pressed on it until he bled out. He thought of Audra. He pictured her in the rain, her shocked, hurt face, as he drove away. In that moment he had felt so powerful. Now he saw it for what it was, a pathetic act of cruelty by a deeply insecure man. That single act, that one moment of petty tyranny, had cost him everything. Across the city, in a place of warmth and light, Audra was watching the evening news with Vincent. The report on the Beaumont Industries takeover came on complete with a somber photo of Preston. Audra felt a strange pang, not of pity, but of a sad final closure. The man on the screen was a stranger to her now, a ghost from a life that no longer felt like her own. She turned to Vincent. "Is it over for him?" "Yes," Vincent said, his voice gentle. He picked up the remote and switched off the television, plunging the room into a soft, quiet glow from the city lights outside. "His company is gone. The divorce will be finalized next week on our terms. He has agreed to relinquish all parental rights. He will be left with enough to survive, but not to thrive. He will never trouble you or your child again." Audra let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding for months. A chapter of her life, a dark and painful one, had finally closed. "Thank you, Vincent," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "For everything. You didn't just save me. You gave me a future. Your father asked me to watch over you," he said, his own eyes glistening. "I'm just keeping a promise. Now the only thing you need to focus on is bringing my grandniece or grandnephew into the world. That's the only business takeover that matters now." He smiled, and in that moment the powerful billionaire, the corporate titan, disappeared, and all she saw was her godfather, her family. The fall of Preston Beaumont wasn't just an ending. It was the clearing of rubble so that something new and beautiful could be built in its place. A week later, the divorce was finalized. Preston Beaumont signed the papers in a soulless legal office, a man hollowed out. He was no longer the titan of industry. He was a cautionary tale whispered about on Wall Street. The document stripped him of his wealth, his company, and his name's legacy. The final signature, the one relinquishing all legal claim to his unborn child, was a barely legible scrawl. With that, he vanished from Audra's life forever. Audra, however, had one final piece of business. She had asked Vincent to arrange a meeting. Not for gloating, not for revenge, but for herself. She needed to close the door, not just have it slammed for her. They met in a neutral space, a private room in a quiet downtown hotel. Preston was already there when Audra walked in, flanked by Vincent. He looked smaller, diminished. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple shirt and trousers. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Audra was 7 months pregnant now, her belly a proud, perfect sphere. She radiated a calm strength that was entirely her own. She was not the weeping woman left on the curb. She was a survivor, a creator of a new life. "Preston," she said, her voice, even and clear, devoid of the tremor he had so often inspired. He flinched at the sound of her voice and finally looked up. He saw not the victim he had created, but a woman he no longer recognized. "I didn't come here to yell or to shame you," she began, her hands resting on her belly. "I came here because I needed to understand." Why, he was silent for a long moment, staring at the polished table. "I don't know," he finally mumbled. "I got lost. I wanted more. I always wanted more. You were good. You were kind. And I saw that as an obstacle, a weakness. I thought power was about being hard, about being ruthless. And what did that ruthlessness get you?" she asked softly. He finally met her gaze, his eyes filled with a bleak, empty understanding. "Nothing," he whispered. "It got me nothing." "I loved you," Preston Audra said, and the words held a genuine past tense sorrow. "I believed in the man I thought you were. That man is gone, if he ever existed at all. I want you to know that I forgive you. Not for you, but for me. I can't build a future for my child while carrying the weight of your cruelty. So I'm letting it go." She stood up, her movements graceful. "This child," she said, her voice ringing with protective love, "will be raised with kindness, integrity, and compassion. She will know love not as a transaction, but as a foundation. She will be everything you are not. Goodbye, Preston." She turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance. Vincent, who had stood silent in the corner like a sentinel, followed her, leaving Preston alone with the ghosts of his ambition. That was the true reckoning, not the loss of his money, but the quiet, dignified finality of her forgiveness, a gift he knew he would never deserve. 3 months later, Lena Rose Monroe was born. She had Audra's gentle eyes and a tuft of dark hair. She was perfect. Audra held her in her arms in the private hospital suite, a wave of love so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Vincent stood by the window looking at the mother and child, his face alight with a joy he hadn't felt in decades. He wasn't just a godfather anymore. He was a grand godfather. Life settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. Audra, with Vincent's guidance and her own recovered inheritance, chose not to retreat from the world, but to reshape a piece of it. She established the Monroe Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting single mothers and children facing sudden hardship, a reflection of her own journey. She proved to be a natural leader, her innate compassion now honed by a quiet strength and business acumen she never knew she possessed. She found a purpose that was entirely her own. The Davenport penthouse was no longer just a sanctuary. It was a home filled with the sounds of a baby's laughter. Vincent, the formidable billionaire who could make markets tremble with a single phone call, was utterly captivated by his tiny grand-goddaughter. He would spend hours simply holding her, telling her stories about her grandfather Thomas and the adventures they had. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after she had been left in the rain, Audra stood with Vincent on the penthouse terrace, holding a toddling Lena's hand. The city sprawled before them, a tapestry of steel and light. It was the same city where she had felt so lost and alone, but it looked different now. It looked full of promise. "Your father would be so proud of you," Audra Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "He'd be proud of you too," she replied, squeezing his arm. "You kept your promise." Lena let go of her mother's hand and took a few wobbly steps toward Vincent, her arms outstretched. He scooped her up and she giggled, her small hands patting his cheeks. In that moment, surrounded by the love of her daughter and the man who had become her father, Audra knew she hadn't just gotten revenge. She had achieved something far greater. She had turned an ending into a brilliant, beautiful beginning. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a new dawn had broken brighter than she could have ever imagined. That night on the rain-slicked pavement could have been the end of Audra's story. For a man like Preston, people were disposable. But he made a fatal error. He underestimated the woman he married and overlooked the guardian watching from the driver's seat. This wasn't just a story of revenge. It was a testament to the fact that true strength isn't found in cruelty or power, but in resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. Audra didn't just reclaim her life. She built a new one, better and stronger, on the ashes of her husband's betrayal. If this story of justice, resilience, and the dawn of a new beginning resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that even the darkest storms eventually pass. And for more stories of triumph over adversity, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to life. Thank you for listening.